Hello. Good evening. We're
Hello,
back.
good evening.
Uh, so I'm Colin again.
And
Back this week
I'm Cory.
with
Uh,
Cory.
First time joining.
Yeah. I'm the chief of bothering. I'll go over a little bit what I am again. I'm basically the person who I'm the project manager. I'm the operations guy, point of contact. Uh, Pretty much just keep the wheels turning here at Luminous. And then joining me today to talk about the lore and the world of Luminous is Cory.
Yes, I am our creative director, co-art director. I do all the stuff with words and pictures. If there are words or pictures, I have probably had a hand in it somewhere.
Yeah. So you want to tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the project?
Yeah, sure. So I had been DMing for a long time, and I was your DM, as you well know. I had been doing my own sort of writing and storytelling for a long time. And you got brought into Luminous before I did, because you knew our other Colin uh, from way back. And so he had mentioned, I believe, to you that he wanted somebody to take over kind of the storytelling aspect of the game. Um, he and I was actually just reading through our old messages as kind of reminding myself about this. We met up at a Pint House Pizza in South Austin, and we talked for like 3 hours. And he laid out his entire like story vision um, of this like thing that he'd been working on since he was a kid. And I don't want to go too deep into like what his original vision was because that's kind of his story to tell, and I'm sure eventually he'll be on here and he can talk about it more. But he sort of laid out this story he'd been working on since he was a kid, um, and we talked a bit about like what parts of that are really important to you to keep, what parts of it do you feel like aren't as important, like where do you want sort of me to put a spin on it, and what's like really sacred to you. And so together we kind of worked through what the base setting of the game was going to be. And so then I came on in 2023, I think around March, June, maybe somewhere in that range. And we spent the first 6 months, I think, just working through what ended up becoming our first four factions, as well as like another 5 to 10 factions that we have since put kind of on the back burner
Right.
um, for future sets. And then last year, you and Colin came back from Gamma and announced we were going to be pivoting to a new product. And so we've spent the last year really focused in on the Wanderers product, which has a totally different sort of lore. It's obviously set in the same world, but we had to kind of take a step back now that we weren't starting with the factions and think about like, what's the story going on here? So
Yeah, so I guess my question then we introduced this the Wanderers. It wasn't really on the roadmap when we were designing the factions. Um, how did how were you planning on telling the story with the factions, and how did doing the Wanderers kind of force you to reevaluate that? And how did the two maybe intermingle?
yeah, I think originally we were planning on the story being a lot more scattershot in the sense that like it was just going to be like looks at different factions as kind of like a vignette of the world. Like we wouldn't have as much of an overarching narrative. We'd have kind of a world narrative, and then we would talk about like how the factions positioned into it. But then when we pivoted a little and decided we wanted to do these core sets, these like wanderer sets with every faction release, essentially, it gave us a chance to be like, well, what if these, since we're going to be doing, this kind of like core thing, what if that became the through line on the whole narrative? Because it would give us a chance to kind of take a further step back and be like, outside of the factions, what's going on in this world and who are some characters we can sort of watch interact with the factions so that we're not only kind of looking at what these factions are doing.
Okay. Yeah, Neil, hey, welcome. He asks, any novels on the horizon?
That's definitely the hope. Right now, my life is the pictures part of Words and Pictures. So I do all of our art briefs for our cards, and so I spend most of my time on the game right now, writing up what our kind of uh, what we want the artists to be working on. But we do have right now a few short story like vignettes that will go up on the website over the course of the next few months as we're revealing the factions. And then eventually, yes, we do have plans for the novels. That is a part of the roadmap. Uh, so those will definitely come. I think we're looking at uh, potentially putting like some chapters of narrative on the website as well. Um, and so eventually those will probably become condensed into a novel. But
Yes.
the
So like a serialized approach almost.
yeah, well, and I
A
want
la Charles Dickens.
yeah, all Charles Dickens. My I want people to be able to read the story just on our website. I don't want to gate all of it behind a purchase necessarily. So we'll be putting as much lore as we can on the website as we, especially as we get closer to our Kickstarter later this year. We're going to start once we open up those faction pages. They'll have their own sort of story highlights. But yeah, thanks for the question, Neil.
Yeah, so we have a pivot to kind of a through line. So the Wanderers, just to give um, like roadmap kind of insight, is each year the goal is to have a Wanderers set that is just these like neutral cards to kind of carry the main story, as well as four factions that kind of like rebound off of where the main story is in its current state. And I guess that's a decent transition into kind of like what the main topic of today is, which is like, so we you had this main narrative in mind. We have the Wanderers now.
Mm-hmm.
Where where are we in the story of Luminous and Ardua, the continent that the
Yeah,
Luminous is based on? So like, like
yeah.
get us caught up to speed on like where the story is now.
Sure, yeah. And I guess at a high level, so first you mentioned Ardua, which I think is funny because I was going back through our cards. You'll notice the name Ardua doesn't actually appear on any of the Wanderers cards. It appears on the box, but the name of the continent came about so late in development that I think it actually didn't even end up on any of the cards. And then as a fun trivia piece, I think you guys talked about last week the game used to have a different name, and we based the name of the continent on one of the older names for the game, uh, which I think is fun. But where we're at with the story right now, so we basically start with this continent. It is the continent of Ardua, and it has been the home to an ancient race uh, of presumably humans. There's not a lot of proof of that, I guess, technically, but they assume they're humans based on like the construction, the way it's all set up. Uh, and they lived there thousands of years ago. People aren't sure exactly how long ago. They think probably 2 to 3,000 years ago, based on like archaeological evidence. But they aren't sure. They Humans have rediscovered Ardua after thousands of years, and so what that ends up looking like is essentially humanity was living on a totally separate, different continent up until about 300 years ago. And at that point, their continent underwent some sort of horrible event. They aren't sure exactly what happened. The land started dying. People started becoming diseased. It was sort of a collapse that they went through, and they ended up sending people out to just search for a new home. So thousands of ships set off from this old world continent, and they are out there looking for a new home. They're not all together. They all go off in different directions. Some of them stick together, but you got different batches of convoys and fleets sort of searching the oceans for a new home for humanity. Uh, the fleet that we're interested in was 107 ships that made their way to what we now know as Ardua. So after a long time at sea. I forget the exact number of years. It's like 10 years that they were
That
sailing.
is a long time at sea.
It is. I've written some stuff about the voyage, capital V voyage, that they went through to explain how a convoy of ships survives 10 years at sea, um, which I think will eventually end up on the website. But for now, suffice to say, after 10 long years, they find Ardua. Uh, it is strange. They immediately find that it has this sort of ancient civilization on it, these relics. They discover essence, our form of magic that sort of comes from these orbs, and so they start to immediately kind of experiment a bit with all of these things. Our story picks up way later, about 300 years later, um, on Ardua, and we see sort of the civilization that humans have built on the ruins of this much older, much stranger, much more magical civilization. Um, so we pick up with Raya Jin, our protagonist. And so you were asking about the changes for the Wanderers. One of the things that introducing the Wanderers really let us do was like have a protagonist. Um, Not really something we could do with the way we were envisioning how factions work. We would have had just a lot of characters. This kind of lets us have somebody who is like our almost audience insert character, right? Because she comes from one of the other continents that humans settled on 300 years ago. And her ship's job, was to go out and try and find where other people had ended up. And so she is part of a crew coming from a continent without magic, but that's a bit more technologically developed. And so she arrives on basically a steamship, and she gets blown out of the water by a ship using magic. Um, and so she is our one of our three favorite in the Wanderers. But her story is kind of what is propelling us through everything. The story of her washing up. She's in this strange place. She has to learn, the rules of this place, just like we have to learn the rules of the place. And she gets to experience everything with sort of fresh eyes, the same way we're experiencing everything.
Right. So explain kind of how we got to Raya as protagonist, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, we knew we wanted somebody to kind of be that audience character, right? That fish out of water story. For me, uh, I went through a few different versions of this. One of the things that Colin came to me with early on in that early meeting was that he wanted a character who kind of explored the continent. And so originally we had her, I think, being part of like a faction. But this with the Wanderers, it let us like really lean into that idea of like someone who isn't part of things, but who can kind of drive the story forward by being something all of the other factions have to react to. And so Raya's place in the story, uh, aside from just being a way for us to experience everything, is to be kind of the driving force behind a lot of the conflict that we're going to experience. And so she ends up being kind of like a MacGuffin for every other faction, because she's like an alien basically. And that's how I conceived of her a lot as we were sort of working on all of this, was like, because they only have this one continent, they're not as aware that there are other places that people live. They know theoretically like other humans are out there somewhere. But Raya shows up. She's on essentially a much more advanced technologically ship than they know about. She doesn't have magic, but she does have knowledge of things they don't really know about. And so different factions want her for different reasons. They want the secrets of the ship she had, or they want to know more about where she came from, or other reasons that'll become clear in the lore. Some of the factions have ulterior motives for why they're kind of hunting her down. But yeah, so as a character, the idea with her was to be kind of the to be the wanderer of the Wanderers, right? She is the character that is most explicitly like not from here, who is wandering about. She doesn't have a faction allegiance, and that's what the Wanderers are all about, is like being able to slot in kind of to any faction. And so she's the ultimate kind of wild card. That was the goal with her, at least.
Okay. And so Is her continent experiencing a similar kind of cataclysm? Like, why are they out exploring?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we won't know a lot about where she comes from, and that's kind of intentional because I don't want to make like right off the bat. I want to focus on Ardua, right? This
Right.
is our setting. This is where we're focused on. What we know about where she came from is that obviously they're a little more technologically advanced, but she's not aware of magic, so magic is new to her. So she's experiencing magic in the same way, kind of we experience magic, right? Um, but what we do know is like her continent was similarly settled by people coming off of the old world who set out and were looking for a new home. They found one. It was not covered in ancient relics, right? Like the ancients hadn't settled it, so they didn't have all of this weird technology and magic to build on. Instead, they had to innovate for themselves, and so that's why they end up going down more of a technological path than what we kind of see on Ardua, where they go down more of like a weird science fantasy path because they've got all of this magical technology to work with.
Right. So we're dealing with on Ardua. They have a shared ancestor though in the old world.
Yes. So, like for instance, when she shows up, they speak the same language, but everybody's like, "You have the weirdest accent I've ever heard.
Okay.
You're speaking like the right tongue, but it's 300 years of drift. So it's like she's got an old world accent basically, or a divergent accent, I guess. Probably
Right.
neither group really sounds like what people used to sound like, probably. But that lets us solve the language barrier issue, right? We don't have to deal with like a universal translator or anything.
Right. So did Raya obviously Raya probably didn't come here alone. She's not on a ship. She's not sailing a ship on her own.
No.
So what happened to her crewmates?
Yeah, so this is one of the fun things about the Wanderers, and it was one of the things I really wanted to do as we were doing it was showcase a lot of different parts of the world in our cards. We've got almost 50 cards in the Wanderers set, and I really wanted each of them to really further the telling of the story. So Raya, each favored has kind of a card that shows their friends, their factions, um, or sorry, not their factions, their compatriots, I guess, their allies. So Raya has Raya's Horizon Guard as one of the cards in the Wanderers, and these are people from her ship, essentially. So her ship had their version of Marines, right? The Horizon Guard. And their job was to protect the ship. The ship itself was like an exploration ship. Raya was an officer on that ship, but not like a high ranking one necessarily. She's the second navigator. Um, so what happens after they all crash? She assumes she's the only one because she doesn't know of anybody else who made it to shore. Uh, a few people do, specifically a few of the Horizon Guard. And so these are kind of like tertiary characters that we get to watch experience the world in a very different way than she does, because she sort of washes up, is found, and becomes embroiled in Arduan politics in this epic quest. She's having a journey into magic and adventure and learning like all about all these political intrigues. Meanwhile, the Horizon Guard are like commandos behind enemy lines, basically. They're trying not to be found. They're trying not to get involved, but they do find out that Raya is still there. They find out that an officer from their ship has washed up, and so they're trying to find her. That's their main goal, while avoiding being found themselves. Um, and so each of the favored has a little bit of like a background character that kind of comes up with them.
Yeah, that's a good transition to the other favored.
Yeah.
Where do they fit into the story?
Uh, yeah, I mean, when we knew we wanted to do multiple favored, and so once we knew we were going to have a protagonist, the most likely next favored was an antagonist, who is her primary sort of enemy, uh, and that led us to the concept of okay, well, if she's really being hunted down, if people are trying to get their hands on her, if I need to find somebody, I'm going to hire a bounty hunter. And not only am I going to hire a bounty hunter, I'm going to hire the best bounty hunter, which is how we got to the creation of Silgar. Silgar is like uh
Oh, hold on, real
this
quick. Nathan
yeah.
asked, "How many different languages are there?"
Man, that's a good question. I do think there's probably multiple languages, but because it's been about 300 years since everybody came in the like 100 ship convoy over to Ardua, I think there's probably been a fair amount of like pigeon mixing, right? The languages have kind of done a lot of borrowing from each other, and so they're all speaking probably at this point a pretty shared dialect. Um, because there weren't that many people when they started, like 300 years ago, that made it here, and then they've kind of expanded out of that. I think you've got one really dominant language, and then you've probably got a few like really hyper local dialects. Because one of the things about Ardua is you have big city center, and then you have lots of frontier towns that are really isolated from one another. Um, and so those ones probably diverge pretty quick. But yeah, I would say, I mean, we're in the fantasy realm of like everybody's speaking the same language. How easy is that? Other than when we start to get into like our non-human populations, so like our Kinda and a few other races that haven't necessarily been revealed yet. Um, some of them are hinted at in our lore for eagle-eyed
Yeah,
readers.
read the flavor text.
But yeah, so I mean, we've got one primary language, and then I think there's probably like dialects out there.
So it'd be like
Uh,
the Louisiana Creole versus
yeah, well, and like I said, like technically Raya speaks the same language they do, but like it's pretty noticeably different. Like
immediately
if
obvious that
somebody,
she's not from around here.
yeah, it'd be like if somebody speaking 1700s like British English rolled up on the shores of,
Some Chaucer Middle English bullshit.
yeah, like you would be like, I kind of get what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things she has to learn probably early on is like how to not stand out so much.
I've made more literary references tonight than I have in the last 6 years.
Good.
Yeah.
That's my influence.
Yeah.
Um,
Anyway,
but yeah,
Silgar.
yeah. So Silgar, I mean, in my head, I mean, he's Tarzan and Craven and every huntsman that's ever existed, kind of rolled up into one cool dude. I love Silgar. Melissa, our artist, did such a good job rendering him. I think he looks amazing.
What makes him
But
so special? What makes him so insane?
yeah, I mean, I think it's a mix of personal like uh drive and charisma, because one of the things is like when we've talked about these other cards, so like he has Silgar's elite, and so he's kind of cultivated this aura of like excellence that drives other people to kind of gather around him to feed on his scraps of glory, basically. And so Silgar is known for hunting down big game. Like his art shows him killing a dragon spawn, um, and he will hunt down people if the price is right. He's professional. He's not generally like seen as villainous. Like that was one thing with I really wanted him to be an antagonist and not necessarily a villain. Um, but the idea behind him was like he is just coming at you. He's kind of inexorable, and once he's got your trail, like if you're the target, right? It's kind of that idea of like he's been hired to do a job and he's going to do it, and there's not a lot that's going to stand between him and that target. Uh,
He's a professional.
yeah, but I think what's kind of fun about the story as it progresses is it gets less and less professional as it goes, because he's not used to struggle. He's used to the hunt and like the pitting of like, you know, weapon on weapon, but he isn't able to catch Raya in the way that he would like to. And I think as it goes on, we see him kind of lose composure in a way that I think is really fitting for a character as like kind of primal as he is.
Yeah.
Um,
I
but
have a question about that.
yeah,
What makes Raya so capable of eluding him?
that's actually such a good segue to our third favorite.
Also,
Uh,
Brian asked a question in the chat. Favorite lore point as expressed in a game mechanic.
whoa.
That's an interesting question. I'm gonna have to think about that.
Yeah, that's a good one. Let's talk about Jedos real quick, and we'll
Yeah.
come back to that, Brian. Um, so one of the things that makes Raya able to withstand Silgar's hunt is that pretty early on she comes across Jedos. And so Jedos is our third favor, who came about really late in development, like really late. Um, we were only planning on doing two, and then y'all told me we were going to do a third, and I said I know exactly who it's going to be. Because I had already had this character and kind of his relationship with Raya mapped out, but because we were only doing two favor, there wasn't really a place for him. He's also our only Wanderer's favorite who does technically belong to a faction. So Jedos is a disciple, which people who've been following the website or taken the quiz will know is one of our first four factions. But he fits in with the Wanderers because he's the ultimate black sheep of the disciples. He is called Brother of the Road, and that's because he spends all of his time away from the disciples. His job is essentially to wander. He's technically a recruiter, like that's his job, but even that is not like something he spends much time thinking about. And I think the disciples are more so just happy to have him away because he's kind of a troublemaker in the sense that he uh, has strong opinions, or at least used to, um, and he wasn't shy about voicing them. But at the point we see him at the beginning of this story, he's a bit more disillusioned. He's tried his hand at politics, and it didn't quite work out for him, and so now he's effectively in a self-imposed exile. Um, he is extremely knowledgeable about relics, about Ardua, about this world, and he comes across Raya almost by accident, essentially, uh, and sees just how poorly designed she is for the problem she now finds herself kind of in. She's lost in a strange place with new rules, with new monsters, with strange magic, with weird relics, and she's not able to kind of navigate her way through that to start with. And so he kind of takes on this reluctant mentor figure to her. Um, he ends up, hooking her up with one of our uniques that we could talk about at some point, but Velna, who ends up teaching Raya kind of how to use essence, how to do magic, basically. Um, but he is, I think, what, to answer your question, allows her to kind of survive and get her feet under her enough to actually like challenge Silgar hunt wise.
Yeah. That leads me to another question that I have is what are our heroes like capabilities? So like you mentioned Jedos has all this knowledge. He's super smart. He knows all this stuff. Like is he equipped to do magic? Like what is the like how does that work in our world?
Yeah. So essence in general is something we talked a lot about because obviously like we came at it to start with partially from like a game design perspective, right? It's like we need something that powers your cards, something you're using to actually do the actions that these cards are indicating. And that ended up getting tied in with orbs, right? Orbs are your resources. Well, what are orbs? Well, orbs are ancient relics that are filled with essence. That's the power source that they're using. Okay, well, what is essence? Uh, Essence is essentially like distilled magic. It's been put into these orbs, and the different colors have different meanings. Um, that was one of the things that we got to highlight in the set through our like colored triptych of expand the mind, order the mind, and strengthen the mind, which deal with each of those three essences. And so the flavor texts on each of those kind of talk about like how these different essences affect you. So orange essence tends to be tied in with like life, with things that are vital. Um, and so it tends to fill you with like extra energy. It kind of strengthens your limbs. It increases perception. uh, Whereas like green essence is more orderly. It makes you better at solving problems. Purple essence is more like creative. It makes you better at like uh, I hate this phrase, but thinking outside of the box, right? Lateral problem solving, lateral thinking. It makes you more creative. It makes you also more prone to like act. Um, and so we have all these different essences, and they affect you in different ways, and they all have their own drawbacks too. That's something that isn't highlighted. I really want to do that in like the next little set of cards if we ever do something like this again. Certainly, some sort of flavor text is going to deal with this, but like orange essence makes you very vital, but if you use too much of it, it turns you into essentially like a slave to your senses, right? You become a very carnal in a way. Uh, if you use too much green essence, like it makes you kind of an absent-minded person. Like consider like the absent-minded professor trope, that sort of a thing. So each essence has kind of a, a drawback to it as well. Um, But anyway, so all that said, essence is what we're using to do magic. It's what powers relics. It is what lets people kind of do all these things that we would normally think of as magic. So in terms of what our capabilities are, Jedos obviously as our relic-based favorite. He's a disciple. He has an arsenal of these different things, either that he carries around with him, or that have actually in the disciple fashion been integrated into his own body. So you can kind of see on his art that he has like relic legs, but there's other maybe more hidden facets to his defenses. Silgar obviously is a combat-based favorite, and so he is a martial combatant, right? He's very skilled at arms, and he can also use essence. So one of the things about essence that we wanted was we wanted anybody to be able to use it. It's not like some other magic systems where it's like an inborn trait. It's not a special talent necessarily that people have. It's not like a gene that makes you able to use essence. Anybody could do it. um, Essence is, and I think Velna or maybe Essence Burst, one of our flavor texts talks about this. um, Using essence is actually really easy because it wants to be used. And so when you take it in, it is going to try and expel itself and do the thing that you want to do. But what you'll find sometimes is that the thing that you most want is not the thing that you think you want to happen, or it doesn't happen in exactly the way that you want it to happen. And so the people who are really skilled at using essence, people like Velna, uh, what they're good at is bending it to kind of the way they're good at channeling it in the direction that they want to channel it in.
And
And
a-
so yeah.
and are orbs the only place you can get essence?
No. So you can also get it from luminous blooms. And so luminous blooms, obviously in the game, are sort of a wild essence. And that's because uh, luminous blooms are sort of naturally occurring. Uh, they are filled with just this kind of raw essence. Their role in relation to orbs is kind of not well understood, I think, at the start of this story as we're telling it. I think it'll become clearer over time, kind of what the relationship between luminous blooms and orbs are. Um, but luminous blooms are kind of this thing you can just kind of find, right? You could stumble upon a luminous bloom. And in fact, our story shows Raya finding one at the very beginning. Um, and they are a little bit more unpredictable because they're not filtered right through an orb, but they're also more powerful and more versatile for that because they're not being channeled through what appears to be a machine specifically for filtering essence.
How much do our humans who live on Ardua understand about orbs and relics and all of these things that the ancients left behind? Like what is the level of like, so they land here 300 years ago and
Yeah.
they're like, "Oh, crap, there's this stuff. What do we like what's that been like for them the past 300 years? Like there's
uh,
magic now. What the hell? Like what
Terrifying,
is
yeah, probably.
yeah.
um i I mean, it's a spectrum, right? So you have at the super high end of it, you've got like the disciples, who understand quite a bit about relics, who understand uh quite a bit about orbs and essence. Maybe less about essence per se, and more about like the things you can do with it through machinery, through relics. Um, you have people who are only interested in essence as far as it serves a purpose for them, right? They're more concerned with like the practical questions. How do I use it? What can I do with it? Um, and then you have like people who don't probably interact with it very much at all. A small town might have a relic that they use for some very specific purpose. It
Is that
helps their.
purpose what it was designed for?
No, I mean definitely not. One of the things that we talked about a lot during like the ideation phase behind like relics was we want to show things from lots of different perspectives, and also from the perspective of somebody who doesn't know what they have. And so the example that we used a lot was like, okay, imagine if we had a relic that every single faction had. It was this small handheld, it was like the size of your hand, and this faction uses it, and they've discovered that it can calculate sums incredibly quickly. And this other faction has it, and they're using it, and they've discovered that it can produce a shining light that they can use to see. And you have another faction who's discovered that if somebody else has one, the two of you can have a conversation over long distances. And it's like, okay, they've all found an iPhone. They all only know how to use one app on that iPhone. And so to different people, it looks like an incredibly different thing. But to the ancients, it was, something
All of it.
completely
It was an
different.
iPhone.
It was all of those things, or
Yeah.
it was something completely different.
Right.
And so it's people channeling kind of their limited knowledge in ways that they know how to do.
And how did these relics survive for however long, an indeterminate amount of time?
Yeah,
It's
sure.
been a while
It's
since the
been at least
ancients.
thousands of years. We know
Yeah.
it's been at least thousands of years.
So
And so,
these orbs have existed. These relics existed. They were just dormant.
yeah. So one of the cool things that we have is a lot of these elements. So you'll see, like in this with mobile armory, like you can see the kind of essence is housed in that like glass, which is kind of mimicking an orb in and of itself. Um, but all of the orbs and a lot of the relics are made of glass. This glass and metal theming we see a lot. Uh, it's all over the Wanderers, and it's not really going to go anywhere. Like all of our factions also have this kind of aesthetic with regard to relics. They all have their own aesthetics too going on. And for some of them, we get to see like them kind of rehousing relics in interesting ways. But as far as like what the ancients design philosophy looked like, it was this like glass and metal. Um, and so this motif kind of recurs a lot. And this glass is unbreakable, which is part of what makes it so special. This is how these things have lasted. Um, so a lot of this stuff looks fragile, but it's actually, stronger than steel. Uh, and that's led to, I think, some really fun stuff that we can do with like uh, people who have, because you can't break it, if you find shards of it, that shard is the shape you have to work with. And so we see people with like glass shard weapons, where it's like this shard's kind of like a sword. We'll make a sword out of it. This shard's kind of like a shield. We'll make a shield out of it. And we
And it's
see that kind of
unbreakable, indestructible. So like these are probably very valuable items.
exactly. Well, and it's like if you have a piece that is in a shape that people are going to want, you have something valuable. I had worked on one point at his like little snippet about a glass dealer, and his entire job was that he had all of these different shards of glass in kind of whatever configuration you needed. But then other people, their job is just to go into essentially these like ruins and find what people need. That might be glass, it might be relics, it might be more orbs. They're kind of delving through to see whatever they can get, uh, and putting to use whatever they're able to find.
And how rare are relics and orbs? Like, is this did they find them immediately, or like maybe we can take a step back? I mean, we're getting a little outside of the scope of Wanderers at this point, but
Yeah, we're kind of
um,
talking more about the factions, but that's okay. I mean, different factions are more or less relic rich or relic poor. The disciples obviously have a ton of relics. The you know the Kinda, for instance, have less. They have some cool ones though, because this is getting far afield, but the Kinda were living on the continent before humans rediscovered it, right? So they got kind of first pick over the ancients' relics. Um, but without getting too deep down that road, uh, yeah, the relative like amount that someone has is actually part of the major conflict that we're looking at here, right? These factions are partially in conflict because they want access to these orbs. They want access to these relics. It is one of the primary things they're fighting over, especially when you consider like an orb is essentially an infinitely renewable energy source, because just like in the game, when you expend your orb, you use up that essence, well, it's going to come back, right? So you unexpend your orbs, you ready your orbs, just like that in the setting. An expended orb, an orb that's been used up, will eventually reset itself. So they are, you know, perpetual energy machines.
I guess that
And
answers Brian's question about Corey's favorite
oh, that's
lore
actually,
point
yeah,
as it expressed in game mechanics.
that actually might be. I do enjoy that one. I think my other
My
favorites
favorite
are.
my favorite mechanics are in the factions that
I
are
was gonna
expressed
say
in lore. The wanderers mechanically are pretty basic, I would
they're
say.
pretty evergreen.
Yeah.
I mean, the more charitable way to
Yeah,
describe that.
evergreen.
We tried to keep them pretty relatively simple, but yeah, actually, I would say that I think the interplay between orbs as an energy source in the lore and orbs as an energy source in the game is like really tightly constructed, in a way that I really like. So, thank you for bringing us back around to Brian's question.
Okay, so we have Raya landing. That is kind
Mhm.
of the catalyst of our story.
Yes.
Um, it is told ostensibly through some of the cards. Um, is is the end of the Wanderer's story kind of like the end of the first book, for instance?
Yeah. So
This set of the Wanderer's cards, or are the faction cards going to kind of interplay with them?
I think they're happening basically contemporaneously, because long term, the idea, right, as you mentioned earlier, is to be releasing kind of yearly updates of a Wanderer set, some factions, whatever that cadence kind of ends up looking like. The goal is to continue to do updates, new factions, new Wanderer sets. Um, so the Wanderers one, what we've got out now, is kind of setting up a world, and then our first four factions are going to be interacting with that world as is. And so over the course of the next, 6 months, however long, we're revealing more of like these factions, we're also going to be revealing more of the story and kind of how they fit into Raya's story. We're going to be progressing towards like the next sort of stage. So when the next Wanderers set comes out, we'll kind of see what the new status quo looks like. We'll see more characters. We'll see updates to what our characters are doing, and how more factions are interacting with them.
So we in the Wanderers we have our favorites. Those are obviously named characters, and we
Yeah.
have. How else are you able to tell like the unique story through like the Wanderers through the cards?
Yeah. So obviously, our favorite, our huge point of that, and we're able to kind of put a lot of lore spotlights on them. Each favorite has like their back with a little bit about their story, and then we've also got our uniques. So like I mentioned, Velna earlier, she's one of the 7 uniques that come in the Wanderers. One of the things, because we have um, multiple copies of cards, we have standard cards, right, where you've got a few. I was really like adamant that I didn't necessarily want those to be like big named characters, because I don't like it when you've got like extra copies of a character, who's supposedly like important and unique. And so when we landed on unique cards as a thing, I was like, this is the perfect place for us to put these, important named lore important characters. So like Felna, as we mentioned earlier, she ends up becoming like Raya's magic teacher, basically. Um, Velna herself has a whole backstory, more of which will be on the website again as we kind of are launching things as we're ramping up.
Can you give us a little sneak
But
peek of what her deal was?
yeah, so she's her card name is Velna Exiled Magebreaker. And I remember dropping that in the like chat or something, and people were like, "I like the sound of that. I have no idea what a mage breaker is." Um, and so, in my conception, Velna was a very powerful like battle mage who she gets recruited by the major noble house that runs like the main city, House Scar, that we'll talk about way more down the line. Um, she becomes essentially like their trainer for their like mages, and so mage breaker in that sense is more like a drill sergeant, right? She's breaking these mages in, she's training them, and so her job was to train these legions of powerful magic users. She has a falling out with the people in power that leads to a sort of permanent exile. And so when we come across her in the story, she is like fully retired, does not want anything to do with anybody. She's honestly living kind of a pitying life. She's kind of resigned herself to a life that is at its end and isn't going to do anything important again. And of course, it's up to Raya and Jedos to kind of show her there's still important stuff that she can do.
Great. Yeah, and so and she and Jedis just go way back.
They do. I think there's initially some questions about what exactly their past is.
Sure.
There's hints that there's some sort of break between them. Are they romantically entangled? Were they friends? Were they enemies? Like, it's not really clear, I think. And maybe they were all three of those things. That's kind of like Raya trying to figure out what the deal is between the two of them is kind of part of that relationship.
Sure. That's fun.
Our other uniques, so one of the ones I really wanted to have in here was I'm a sucker for like a noble prince. I just like characters that are like good, just basically good people. Um, I always gravitate to those kind of characters. I think it's one of the nice staples of fantasy. It's like that we can just have very unambiguously nice people trying to do their best.
Yeah,
Um,
the one that comes to mind immediately for me is Adolin from Stormlight
yeah,
Archives. Yeah.
Quinn is not
No.
Adolin coded.
Oh
I'll say
yeah, yeah.
that. He
Also,
definitely
worth noting
has
here, glass sword.
glass sword. So this was a case where I wanted to show off like how if you're rich, you can have a glass sword, and it even looks like a sword. We'll see some other people with glass weapons that are not as well tailored. But if you're a prince, you get the coolest glass sword.
Yeah,
But
okay,
yeah,
so when you
Prince.
say prince, what do you mean?
I mean a literal prince. So the Arduin
Yeah, let's explain
monarchy.
the Arduin political structure, Corey. We have 15 minutes. Let's go.
All right, let's do it. I actually really love their political structure. I'm a huge nerd about politics, and so when we were like
This guy knows
talking,
everything about the French Revolution.
uh, when we were like we're gonna give them, I don't even. I'll be honest. I don't think I picked a monarchy necessarily, um, but it's so ingrained in fantasy that like it kind of always had to be. But I wanted to do something a little bit different. So we have like an elective monarchy that they've set up that is based on like this kind of clan system, almost like powerful families, but they're not actually all families. Some of them are tied to like the original ship that you landed into the continent in like 300 years ago.
Like
That's
if
a
you
whole
were a
thing.
captain or an officer or something, like you then became like a noble.
Well, no, well, sometimes yes, sort of. I
Okay,
mean, the captains definitely, but what I mean is, imagine if instead of political districts based on where you lived, your
I see.
voting rights were tied to what ship you came in on. And so all of the descendants of the people who landed on a particular ship vote for their representative for that ship, even though that ship is at this point, 300 years later, a totally like socially constructed thing. None of these people were on that ship.
They're
um,
clans or maybe
they're
even
clans,
factions.
maybe even factions. They are political and social constructs of a constituency. But anyway, so the monarchy, if you are descended from one of those captains, you are eligible to be monarch, because they had to have some sort of hereditary monarchy in there somewhere, because it's a fantasy setting. Uh, and so Quinn is actually descended from the first king, uh, but his family has not held the monarchy in some time. Because one of the things I really liked about this system was that meant that the monarch and the heir are not generally related at all. Um, and so there's a fun scene where Raya assumes the king is Quinn's dad, and he's like, absolutely not. Just because, of course, like the prince and the king would be related.
Because
But
that's
in
how
this
it is on
case,
Raya's continent.
or yeah, I mean, I don't know if they have a king. I don't think they do. But that's how she understands monarchy to work, right? That
Sure.
is the traditional higher, like, hereditary monarchy. Whereas they're doing like a weird constitutional sort of elective monarchy thing
So
that's
he
like non-hereditary but clan based.
are all offspring of these old captains princes and princesses, or is Quinn special
No,
because of a reason?
Quinn was elected. So okay, if we're really getting into this, so they have basically a Congress for like uh equivalent that is called like the mast in a callback to their roots with all of the captains. Because originally when they
Nathan.
landed, all the captains basically just formed like the elite. Um, and
Nathan.
yeah, I just saw it.
Yeah.
Uh, Nathan says because generational wealth and power is entirely a fantasy construct. Would that it were. Uh, but yeah, so Quinn is, they're not all princes and princesses, but they are certainly all, mostly for the most part, uh, important, right? They form kind of
They
a
could be
pseudo,
princes or princesses.
theoretically, right? They're
Yeah.
eligible.
Yeah.
And so people's genealogies become important in that way. Uh, Quinn is a prince because he was elected to be the heir to the crown. So generally, you've got the monarch, and then you have the elected prince. When the king or queen dies, the elected, prince or princess will become the new monarch, and then they'll elect another heir. Um, and so they kind of choose the eventual successor. So they're not all princes or princesses. Quinn is a prince because he was elected, and he was elected because, I mean, partially he's extremely earnest, charismatic, but also he's, like I said, descended from the original king, the first one that they elected, and the king that is currently in power is perceived as being somewhat weak. And so I think there's a very strong undercurrent of an attempt to return to like the power of the original king. And so people kind of, there's this legacy that Quinn is trying to live up to while working hard against the king who's currently in power, because usually they have a pretty collaborative relationship, right? The goal is for the monarch to train their eventual replacement. The king in this case hates Quinn, did not want him elected, and has basically shunted him off to the side. So a big part of Quinn's story is like, what do I do if I'm locked out of power? I know I'm eventually going to have to lead these people, but I'm not getting any practical experience in doing so. I've been like relegated to, the corners of the court.
And where does he fit into our story with Raya and Jedos and Velna and Silgar?
Yeah, so they, I mean, without giving too much away, I guess they end up going through the capital as part of their flee from Silgar, and that's where they're going to become most aware of like the political aspects of the people chasing them down, and that's where they'll meet Quinn, um, and uh, whether he'll be helpful for them or not remains to be seen, but he's a very good guy. Like I said, I'm
Right.
a sucker for a noble prince, and so it's, I don't think, too hard to imagine that he will end up being some sort of benevolent figure for them, or at least attempting to help them. He'll be working in opposition to some of the forces, specifically like Silgar's benefactors, the people who have hired Silgar to go after Raya. I think we see a lot of that political side of things through Quinn's eyes, as he's kind of trying to put his own fingers on the scale of this kind
Mm.
of conflict that's playing out as Raya and Silgar are cat and mousing around the continent.
And where, I guess, with only a few minutes left here,
Yeah.
get any questions. Anyone in the chat has any questions, feel free to ask them now. And I guess one of my questions about the story in general is if we had to kind of describe the vibe other than just like traditional fantasy, like how can we make a sell on like what makes this a little different? Like how are we putting our own spin on things?
Yeah, I
Because I know you care
definitely
about that a lot,
I do.
and I do
Uh
too.
yeah. I mean, for one, we're definitely closer in on the science fantasy. Science fantasy is a genre I love. Something that blends like weird sci-fi elements into fantasy. Um like I just think that's great. A Canticle for Leibowitz, for all of my literary folks out there, is like my favorite book, which shows just a bunch of weird science fantasy stuff over the course of like thousands of years. Uh, but Luminous, I think part of what makes its lore stand out is that we are taking some of those traditional fantasy tropes and we're putting them in a setting where we can kind of shortcut a lot of those elements. I think it's really funny. I was describing this to somebody the other day as like, imagine you had a traditional Renaissance fantasy village, but they built themselves on the ruins of like a 25th century like post-apocalyptic world, and all of the weird ways that that would express itself. So you've got, you know, like a blacksmith, and they look like a traditional Renaissance blacksmith, except their smithy is like ultra advanced, and they're churning out like laser pulse swords. Like I think that's kind of the fun realm that we're working in. Is like, what if you skipped straight from the 1400s into like the 25th century, and like what is that going to do to your development? um, I think is an area I'm really excited to explore, because they've basically skipped the need to invent a lot of things. So they have these old kind of mindsets and structures that are now being juxtaposed against the crazy advanced technology that they find themselves in possession of through no merit of their own. Like it's kind of kids who have found their parents' power tools is the other thing that I use. Um, but yeah,
That's a great question, Neil. Do we plan to go wide and have the cast of characters expand, or deep and continue to explore how the characters change over time?
that's a
I,
great
I
question.
was literally queuing up, so this is our tease for what's to come in the
Yeah.
future. But
So this is
so
yeah.
all of the favors will have alternate arts, and this is one. This is Quinn's alternate art. Um,
So one of the things, yeah, that we're doing with the alternate arts is showing other moments in their lives. So this is Quinn after he's been elected. So this is a little bit of like a past shot. He's being crowned by the current king, King Belgrave. Uh, but we want to show these characters like we're cultivating these characters. We want them to recur. We want you to see them at different points. And part of the thing that we're doing with Wanderers and with the overall story is trying to progress it, right? I love seeing a story in like a property like this take like change over time. I don't want it to just be static forever. And so showing you, I guess, so to put it in the parlance that you're kind of using, like I do think deep is kind of what we're looking for. I know, and hopefully this isn't saying too much, but I know like one of the things we're excited to do in future Wanderer sets is like a different version of Raya. Like we could do a different Raya with a different ability to like showcase how she's changed over the
or
course of the story.
Jedos is a disciple. He could
Yeah.
be a disciple, unique or favored in the future. So
Yes.
like we have these characters that we plan on utilizing. Like favorites can become uniques, uniques can become favorites. Like we're definitely planning on them not being thrown away. Yeah, Nathan, what determines if a character is favored versus a unique? Um, I'll let Corey answer that. I mean, this is kind of a design story kind of combination.
Yeah, I for me the difference is, are they currently in like a position to steer? So like for Wanderers, it's a little bit more just like who do we want to showcase? And because it's not like faction based, with the factions, it's a little easier to be like, well, this is a favored because they're actually kind of in a position to be in charge or steer that faction in some way. Um, when we when we named it favored, part of the idea was like they are the people in favor with regards to that faction. So that generally means like they're leading it or they're important in some way. Um, they are like steering the ship. In some cases, literally for the Zamp. Uh, for Wanderers, it's like much more vibes based because there's not like an actual faction they're leading. It's more just like who are we shining a spotlight on?
Right. Um, Yeah, I mean, we're nearing the end of the hour, but hopefully that gives everyone a decent idea of kind of where we are in the story, what the world of Ardua is kind of like. We don't want to give away too much because that's what the actual story is for. You'll
Right.
discover more about relics. You'll discover more about the magic, the secrets of Ardua, why these ancients were able to become so powerful and so advanced, maybe even what caused their downfall. Those are secondary, but they're also part of the mystery of the world. Um, and yeah, Nathan, we can definitely see Quinn as a favorite in a future wander or a faction. Like there,
Yeah,
who
absolutely.
knows? That's one of the things that these characters will recur periodically. I'm not the one writing the story. Who knows? They might die. I don't know. I don't I don't
At
know what kind of
least, I'll tell you this: at least one character who is on a card will die.
gasp. Find out. Stay tuned for more. Thanks for joining us, Corey. Tune in next
Yeah,
Monday for another group. As always, join the Discord if you're already in the Discord. Pop any questions you might have about the story, the lore. Corey will be there to answer anything about design. Just keep the conversation going there. And if you're finding us somehow from somewhere else through the VOD, like the link to the Discord will be in the description. We'd love to have you in preparation for what we have going on. We've got a lot. Hopefully, this proved that Corey's been thinking really hard about this world, and it is a fully fleshed out world that is uh, has a lot to offer. Thanks for joining us tonight, y'all.
yeah. Thanks everybody. Excited to come back sometime and talk some more about this. There's a lot more we could go over.
There's a lot more to come. All right, bye, y'all.